In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro discusses a range of pressing political issues, focusing particularly on the recent court ruling in France that bans Marine Le Pen from seeking public office for 5 years. This ruling has sparked significant debate about the role of the judiciary in democratic societies and the implications for populist movements across the globe. Shapiro begins by outlining the details of the court's decision against Marine Le Pen, who was convicted of misusing EU funds. The court's ruling not only imposes a prison sentence, but also bars her from participating in the upcoming presidential election in 2027. Shapiro argues that this decision reflects a broader trend of judicial activism aimed at undermining populist leaders, drawing parallels to similar actions taken against Donald Trump in the United States and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. He emphasizes that such judicial interventions threaten the democratic process by sidelining candidates who represent significant portions of the electorate. The conversation shifts to President Trump's foreign policy, particularly his approach to Russia and Ukraine. Shapiro notes that Trump has resisted calls from isolationists within his party and anti-American voices on the left to alter his foreign policy based on external pressures. He highlights Trump's recent comments regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, where Trump expressed anger at Vladimir Putin's criticisms of Ukrainian leadership. Shapiro interprets Trump's stance as a commitment to strong defense policies, asserting that any attacks on American assets or allies will be met with decisive action. Shapiro then delves into Trump's economic policies, particularly his proposed tariffs. He discusses the potential implications of broad tariffs on all U.S. trading partners, which Trump has suggested could be as high as 20%. Shapiro expresses concern that such tariffs could lead to increased prices for American consumers and ultimately harm the economy. He argues that while tariffs may be intended to protect American jobs, they often result in higher costs for consumers and can stifle economic growth. Shapiro emphasizes the need for a balanced approach that considers both national security and economic realities. The podcast also features a discussion on the current political climate in South Africa, where Shapiro interviews Dr. Ern Root, an Afrikaner activist. Dr. Root provides historical context about the Afrikaner community in South Africa, tracing their roots back to the 17th century. He explains that the narrative surrounding South Africa's transition from apartheid to a democratic society has often overlooked the complexities and challenges that have arisen since 1909. 4. Dr. Root argues that the current government has failed to address the needs of all South Africans, leading to increased tensions and violence, particularly against farmers. Dr. Root highlights the alarming rates of violence against farmers in South Africa, noting that these attacks often carry racial undertones. He points out that while the media may downplay the significance of these incidents, they represent a broader issue of racial and economic inequality in the country. The discussion touches on the controversial song "Kill the Boer," which has been defended by some as a form of political expression, despite its violent implications. Dr. Root argues that such rhetoric contributes to a culture of violence and hatred, undermining the potential for reconciliation and unity in South Africa. As the conversation progresses, Dr. Root advocates for a decentralized political system in South Africa, suggesting that local governance could better address the diverse needs of the population. He argues that the current centralized government has failed to represent the interests of various cultural communities, leading to discontent and calls for secession in some regions. Shapiro agrees, emphasizing that a more localized approach to governance could foster cooperation and understanding among different groups. Shapiro concludes the episode by connecting the issues discussed to broader global trends. He warns that the challenges faced in South Africa, including the rise of populism and the role of the judiciary, are indicative of a larger struggle for democracy and representation worldwide. He encourages listeners to engage with these topics and consider the implications for their own countries, particularly as similar dynamics unfold in the United States and Europe.